So my name's Philip Henry, and I'm the owner of Canuck Investments. I was a chemical engineer, and I was able to leave my chemical engineering job and obtain a $20 million portfolio of real estate investments that generates over $2 million a year in revenue. And I'll show you how to do it through all the different hacks and tools that I've learned over the years so you don't have to go through the same challenges that I had.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owners Association, where real estate investors have found success since 1968. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group. This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com. Hello and welcome to episode 549. Philip Henry bought his first property while he was broke and paying off student loans with a newborn at home. It was a rundown 2-unit in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Today, he owns nearly 100 residential and commercial doors, generating $2 million a year. He got there by mastering the fundamentals and using every financing strategy and creative workaround that he could find to keep moving forward. Today, we're getting into exactly how he built his portfolio step by step. Philip, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Why don't you tell us how you got started and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, as I look back at the journey, it's certainly been a journey, that's for sure. But it's been well worth it. I can tell you that. I'm married, 3 kids, but my wife Stephanie and I are originally from Canada, and I went to chemical engineering. And I just figured, I get an education, get a good job, find a good company to work for, and slog your way through it and climb the corporate ladder, and life will be good, right? So I moved to Boston from Canada, started working for this organization, and we really didn't have any money. We had no money. I had student loan debt, and a lot of people starting their career would buy like this single family home, and then they would be mortgage poor and almost like, again, a further trapped into this corporate space, because you just can't escape that. And I thought, geez, man, maybe what we'll do is there's this old rundown 2-unit building in Pawtucket, and I read a little bit about real estate investing through like Rich Dad Poor Dad, or I had I just had started my journey of figuring out like another path. And so we took the risk and moved into this 2-unit, lived in 1 unit, fixed up the other, and then rented it. And then a year later, got transferred to Maine, and we had to sell the house. So I sold it, and I left the closing table with a check for like $50,000, which was pretty much my annual salary. So I was like, I can't believe it. I just lived in this house. I'd come home from engineering. I'd sand some floors, do some painting, rented it out. And then a year later, I had a check for 50 grand from profit. And I paid off my student loans at that time, and then I was hooked. And then I just started reading more. And when I moved back up to Maine, the first building I bought was a 4-unit, and I didn't know at the time, but I just figured out a way to get in with no money, because again, I still had no money. I used that money to pay down my debt. So I did the FHA 3.5% down program, where it up to 4 units. So I bought a 4-unit. I still own that today, and I bought it for like $200,000. Over the time, I've taken equity out of it, but that property is probably worth $400,000 now, and it cost me 3.5% of $200,000 to get into it. So that's how I started. And then I just had a goal, like I wanted to buy a property a year, which I did.
First of all, like house hacking, what you did, I think, is the best way for anyone to get started in real estate investing. It's just, having done 550 episodes of the show, that is the best way, and anyone can do it. And you, as you just proved, as a house hacker on the 2-unit, were you having did the other side pay for your mortgage and expenses as well?
I think at the time, I was getting, I think, $800 or something for the other unit. So it paid for the majority of my rent. So I think I may have had to contribute $300 or something to live with my wife and I. So yeah, my living expenses were low, but on top of that, I had forced depreciation. So when I sold, I got that $50,000 check because it increased value from 190 to 250 or something. So
Did you force that, like just through improvements to the property, or was it just the market took off?
I did it by forcing appreciation. I fixed my unit up, I fixed the other unit up. So I changed the whole income approach, look and value of the property that way.
What were the economics when you bought the 4 unit? What was did the other 3 units cover your costs for living in the 1 unit?
In that situation, I can't recall if I lived there for long. I know I didn't live there for long at all because my wife wanted to live in her own private residence. But it was an opportunity for me to get in a 4 unit, live in that one for a month or two, and then we found another private primary residence, and then we rented out the one I was in, and then it was cash flowing at that point. So now I had my own single family, and then which was my primary residence, but then I kept the 4 unit, rented out the one I had been in, and then now that was a cash flowing real estate investment that I had inside of the portfolio. And that's how I got started.
Can you mention the FHA 3.5% down? So when you say 3.5, that's 3.5% of the purchase price you put down, and then the FHA puts up the rest. Does anyone have access to that loan? Or does anyone and everyone have access to that loan? Or do you have to be like a first-time home buyer or fall into some specific category?
So my understanding on FHA is that you can have one FHA at any given time. So if you don't have one right now, you can go ahead and use that FHA program. But it is meant for first-time home buyers. So I always say, like, if for the younger generation, I say, listen, I know it's tempting to go buy a single family when you get a job and you start to make money, but if you use the FHA hack and tie up a $500,000 property that's 4 units for $20,000, which is what you probably would have had to pay as a down payment on your primary residence anyway, and now you're living rent free, and then when you decide later on to buy your own primary, that asset's going to cash flow and start building equity. So yeah, I'd say that's the one thing I coach young families to do, is to go that direction.
Do all lenders, like if you go to any bank to get a loan, do they all deal with the FHA 3.5%? And are there income requirements, or like what kind of hurdles do you have to get over to be able to qualify for that?
It's a very flexible program. And I know that for the most part, if you're going to mortgage lenders, whether it's a bank or a broker, they're very familiar with FHA because it's just such a common way. I mean, a lot of people have a hard time coming up with 10% down or 20% down if you're buying a second home. So you have to find ways to preserve your capital and leverage some of these programs. And it's not forever. You're dating that interest rate, and sometimes you have to pay PMI or mortgage insurance because you don't own 20% of the asset. So there's a few extra costs associated with it, but it's worth it because now you own a home, and otherwise you'd be renting, or you'd be, your costs would be much higher. So the ROI is huge, and yes, it's accessible to anybody.
Take us to the next level here. I mean, you bought this 4 unit in Maine. You only lived in it for a little while. Then you bought a primary residence. Where did you go from there with your investing? So
again, I'm starting my career. I have 2 little ones at home. My wife wasn't working because she wasn't allowed, coming from Canada. I'm the only one that had the visa. So, we were really tight on money. So there was a gentleman that was like a little older, and he was offloading some, like, I think it was a 2 buildings, 11 units. And it was about, I think he was asking $250,000 at the time. And I had no capital. So, and I had nowhere to get capital. I didn't know how to raise capital at the time, nor did I have a history of success. So people don't give you money when you don't have a history of success. So interestingly enough, I asked him if I learned seller financing at the time. So we talked through it. He was willing to carry a second note or a second mortgage for my 20% down payment. And then I had closing costs included as well. So I bought these 11 units. Yes, they were not in the nicest of condition. They required a crap load of my elbow grease and labor. but they were rented. They were rented to like lower income people, maybe higher maintenance tenants. But I left the closing table with a check. They prorated rents and deposits and all that. And I acquired 11 units, and I left the closing table, and I had a check in my hand to take over 11 units, which was, you hear about all these no money down and all, you think it's a big, but there's ways to do it. Because I can tell you, I did it. I walked away with a check in my hand, and I now owned 11 more units on top of what I already acquired.
Was this in Maine as well?
It was, yeah.
There is a dark side to that reality in some respects, because you're buying a property that probably wasn't maintained the way it should have been. So you said there was a lot of work that you had to put into it, a lot of, probably some tenant issues. So tell us the downside of that. How much work did you have to put in? Is there a story from like, problems that you had with the tenants? Because I want people to know the reality of it too.
If you buy an asset that's fully tied up and beautiful and pristine, you're going to pay market price for that, right? And demand for those properties are higher. So the benefit is that not a lot of people were begging and pleading and trying to get this dilapidated, worn down home. So the downside is that, yes, you have a lot of work to do. But the upside is you usually get those properties at a significant discount, and the seller is much more willing to do some creative financing. And so the downside is, yes, I remember I'd come home from engineering, and none of this stuff's easy. That's what people, I think, misunderstand. Like it's going to be hard, and you're going to be tested. Do you really want it? So I would come home from engineering, I would go and I'd meet a friend of mine, and we'd sand floors and paint apartments and redo cabinets, and I learned a lot during that time. So my knowledge of real estate investing increased, but it was a lot of work, and it took a lot of time and energy, and going through evictions, and then you have an older building. Yeah, you've redone one unit, but all the other units are still run down, and so you really can't get market rent necessarily, because someone's going to go in and live in this beautiful unit in a not so pretty environment. So you have to, but as you go through one by one, it might take 3-4 years, but now all of a sudden you have an 11 unit building that's been completely redone. All the tenants are desirable tenants. The rents are now all market rents. And so your ability to have a property that's worth double, if not triple, like that property those properties I bought for $250, I just got appraised for $1 million. So was it worth it? Yeah, I'd say it was worth it. It would have taken me an entire career of engineering to sock away $1 million in my 401k. And I already have that with my second purchase.
And it sounds like you were very hands-on. Are you still like managing the properties, or have you moved to third-party management?
Obviously I've purchased a bunch more since then. And I quit my engineering job in 2017. Because I just couldn't be on the road and I had, I think, 50 some units at the time, or doors, if you will. And then I had an opportunity to buy a 32 unit apartment complex, which is the one I'm in right now. This is a 32 unit building. And then I had more cash flow coming in than my engineering career, my 6-figure career. And I said, okay, time to do this full time. So I pulled the plug I told my boss I quit. And here I am.
And are you still as hands-on managing, dealing with all the issues, getting in there and fixing up the rooms yourself, or have you brought on a team or a third-party management company?
So no. So what I've done is I manage inside, but I hired 2 people. So I have 2 full-time people that take all the calls. They do all the maintenance activities. We have meetings every Monday to discuss like what's going on in the portfolio, who's doing what, if there's any vacancies or apartments that we need to fix and prepare for rent. And so, but what I still keep control of right now is I still do the leasing. I still do the advertising, the marketing, and the leasing piece. And I use Buildium software, which is just a property management software to do that, to help kind of manage that process.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. If you're thinking of leaving your W-2 job and becoming a full-time real estate investor, one of the greatest costs you must consider is healthcare for you and your family. When I made this transition myself, I found the whole healthcare insurance process to be confusing and frustrating. That's why I'm glad I met Chad Creasy at RCB and Associates. Chad is a professional health insurance agent who helps real estate investors and small business owners understand and choose their best healthcare options. And best of all, his services are covered by the insurance company and won't cost you a dime. If you live in Michigan and are expecting a change in your healthcare insurance coverage for any reason, or losing employer coverage or transitioning into Medicare, then you owe it to yourself to contact Chad Creasy at rcbassociatesllc.com. Here's a question for you. I mean, you quit your job, your W-2 job, to do real estate, which was much more lucrative for you. Do you ever feel like you just quit your job and now you basically bought into a new job? What is the difference between what you're doing now and and having a job?
There's a bunch of things for me that I look back. I mean, I was on the road a lot. I mean, if you're getting paid six figures in corporate America, like they're not giving that money to you. You're earning it, and that's all time away from home, or it's time away from really building wealth. And so no, I don't regret it at all. I would say that if you design processes and you're willing to take some of that, those nightmare things about, maintenance or fixing toilets or getting calls, you delegate all those activities. And yeah, I mean, I'm on a podcast. So it's a Tuesday at 10 a.m. I went to the gym this morning. I had coffee. I have coffee with my wife in the morning. I spent time with my family. I was able to drive my kids to school. So the freedoms that come with not trading time for money anymore, I don't trade time for money. Whether I am traveling to Florida with my wife for 2 weeks, or whether we decide to go for a trip to Europe, which we have done because I decided to commit to real estate investing. I come back on the 1st and I look, and there's still that revenue is still coming into my bank account. And that never happened before.
Let's talk about your 32 units. So how did you find that? And were you able to finance that creatively as well?
So this building here, what used to be an assisted living building in Bangor, is 32 units. Again, a gentleman had acquired, I don't know if the previous owners maybe were close to short sale or foreclosure, but this gentleman just had a bunch of cash and he bought it, but he wasn't managing it at all. And he was really looking to flip it. And it took me a long time to work with him to figure out a way to make that work. But he carried paper for 10% of the buy price. So I bought it. This is a good example. I bought this building for, I think the NOI, and your listeners will probably have to do a little, but when you're doing real estate investing, you have to understand those terms like net operating income, gross expenses, figuring all that out, cap rates. But when I acquired this in 2017, I bought it for like $1.2 million. The seller carried $120,000 paper. And then I had some other more senior folks in the engineering field that I had expressed my interest in this property, and I needed to get another $120,000. So I just gave this individual a 12% interest on his money for as long as I had it. So they were happy. That was double what they were getting in their 401k or in the market. So, and it was secured by this hard asset, right? So yeah, I got into this deal with no money and bought it for 1.2, used the cash flow that it generated monthly to fix each apartment one by one. And this building is worth $5 million today.
Is that where you stopped, or is there more after that?
There's more after that. The other thing that I learned is that it's, what's shown on a listing is not necessarily without peeling back some layers, you could miss opportunities. And so the next big asset I bought was a huge $35,000 brick building downtown, and it has the university museum. So it's got a beautiful museum in the base of this huge, beautiful building. And it was listed for like high ones, and it had a huge flood policy. It was owned by a nonprofit. So the numbers didn't look very good or appealing at all for a $1.8 million. So, but after making some phone calls, looking at the expense sheet, they had a full-time staff walking around the building, changing light bulbs and like sweeping floors. So they had an $80,000 line item in the expense side of the equation. They had a $45,000 flood policy. So I made some calls and I got a flood insurance policy for $10,000. So there's $35,000 off the expenses. I didn't need a full-time guy because I already had people that could respond to maintenance requests. So there's another 80 grand off the expense side. So I was able to kind of go through that. And same thing, I had the seller carry paper. And again, that's another one I bought for like 1.3 million, and that's probably worth 3. So yeah, one deal can change your life, but you got to be prepared. I always say luck is when you're prepared for an opportunity to cross your path. So if you haven't done the book reading, if you haven't evaluated deals, done enough reps to know what's going on here, how can I look in it, can I increase the income of this asset? Can I decrease the expenses of this asset? And then recalculate some of those numbers and say, okay, if I buy it and I do these 3 or 4 things, what would be the new value of this asset? And when you do that, you can force appreciation. And in some cases, you can force $500,000. Sometimes you can force $1 million. And it takes a long time in making W-2 income to get $1 million.
I teach a class for the Rental Property Owners Association on advanced financial analysis for commercial multifamily. And when you understand that math of how NOI is calculated against cap rate, that mathematically you can determine the value of a property, and how the rule of thumb is every dollar you increase NOI, either by increasing income or decreasing expenses, you can increase the value of that property by $10 to $20, depending on the cap rate.
Exactly. And once you understand that formula, it's so crazy because once you understand that formula, you realize like, holy crap, there's some opportunity there that you can capitalize on. Because if you understand the formula, and you don't, even in this building, if I like, to your example, if you use a 10 cap, right? And I say, okay, I have 32 units and I'm just going to increase each of those units by $50, right? Well, now I'm just sitting talking to you, but I just sent a notice to these tenants, hey, your rent's increasing by $50. Now, what's that per month? Okay, it's $1,500 a month or $1,600 a month times 12 is, I don't know, let's say $15,000, right? So I just made $15,000 a year more, and you divide that by 0.1 from an income approach, and now I've added $150,000 of value to this asset. Because investors buy on the NOI. Investors look at the NOI and say, okay, is this worth it based on the cap rate? What's my offer price going to be? And so if you change the NOI by, to your point, if you change it by 15%, you just increase the value of the asset by 15%.
You're saying that it's 35,000 square foot. It's got a museum in the basement. Is it a residential property? I mean, what is it?
That's commercial. So I have 3 tenants in it. I have the University of Maine that runs the nonprofit museum. They have a lease that is probably going to be around till I'm not here. And then I have an engineering firm, and then I have an economic development agency on the top floor. So I have 3 tenants. And long-term tenants, I don't visit that property very often, but my account shows deposits at the first every month.
So you bought it with tenants in place. You didn't even have to fill it.
Yep.
And the distinction you made, and this is important too, is you found, it seemed overpriced, and it was, but you found real cost savings just by fixing the flood insurance policy and getting rid of one of the full-time positions that wasn't necessary.
None of my competitors had spent the time to go through the expense expenses in detail to find where was this thing hemorrhaging money.
When you see something that's overpriced like that and just sitting on the market, well, there's usually a reason, and you found it and you were able to fix it.
I think, like anything, if you're committed to doing something and you find ways. I mean, the brain's interesting when you think about, when you just change your dialogue to like, oh God, that's overpriced, I can't afford that, or I'll just wait till that comes down. You kind of put yourself in a box, and then that's never going to be the place. It's like, okay, how can I afford that? Just change some of the lingo. Like, how can I do that? And then your brain's thinking, okay, now what can I look at? Be creative. Oh, geez, I guess I could think about asking this guy. He's always talked to me about real estate investing. Sometimes you have to it's just about being creative in your mind and saying, okay, if I present this, a good deal will find investment money. So if you have a good deal and you present a good deal, people are open to providing capital to you. And you may have to give away some ownership. Hey, man, I've done deals where I've given half ownership away in the early stages to people because I needed the money. And it's better to have it's better to own 50% of a $500,000 asset with none of your own money than to own 0% of a $500,000 asset. I'd rather give away half,
Philip, tell our listeners and viewers how they can find out more about you or get a hold of you, and feel free to mention your podcast and anything else you want to talk about.
Two things. I wrote a book called Real Estate, The Blueprint to Firing Your Boss. And it's on Amazon. It's really just a walkthrough. It's a very easy read. It's 100-some pages. It tells you essentially all the different math I use to figure some of this stuff out and to identify opportunities. So that would be a great start. The other thing I have built is I built a very robust analyzing software so that you can very quickly throw in a property, throw in the income, throw in the expenses, and you can find that at propanalyzerpro.ai. So it has some AI tools incorporated in it as well, and to give you a red kind of green, yellow scenario on some of the key performance metrics that you would want to look at for investing in properties and real estate. So go on there. You can try it for free. You can put 3 deals in there, no problem. And then, you can find me on Instagram, Philip M. Henry, Philip with 1 L, M as in Mark Henry. And then the podcast is American Legacy. You can find it on Spotify or Apple Music. Yeah.
How are you using AI in your business?
I am entering AI big time. And I think I would encourage your listeners to also start to leverage the tool. I use it for all kinds of things. I use it for images, for infographics, for marketing. I also use it for deeper research. So if I'm looking at a more complex multifamily or commercial property, I can put all the different parameters in it and ask some of these deeper research tools to look at where the opportunities lie in terms of income and expenses and price per square foot, compare that to local properties in that specific geographical region. And so I can get all this data very quickly. So it really helps me to stay out of making poor investment decisions.
What specifically are you using? ChatGPT, Claude?
I do a ton of Claude work. So Claude, I find I get better results with Claude, but each tool I think has its benefits. So ChatGPT has a great image generator. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll ask Claude to write me the perfect prompt to get what I want out of ChatGPT. And it will write the prompt. I'll copy it, paste it into ChatGPT to get me the results that I want. And then another really, really cool research tool is called Manus.im. Manus does incredible when it comes to deeper research around a geography or an acquisition or the real estate market in a specific region, where things are growing, where things are shrinking. And those are probably 3 really, really good tools to leverage.
Thanks for coming on the show today and sharing your experience, how you got started and the creative financing that you were able to do, the house hacking, which is the best way to get started in investing, and just sharing the strategies that you've employed to be so successful. It's been a real pleasure.
Same. Thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's HIGinvestor.com. This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.